Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Chris, what is the preferred way in which the police go about their business at the moment? There's these two strands of thinking: evidence-based policing versus bobbies on the beat.
It's very, very difficult. The problem that police have got, basically, is that they're too thinly spread, and it's too much is expected of them. There's a long list, isn't it? Every month we hear police need to do more about this, police need to do more about that, and police do their best. They're overwhelmed with bureaucracy. I mean, when I was a young PC, if I took a shoplifter in, then I'd be in and out within an hour. You take a shoplifter in now, and you're doomed for the rest of your shift for 6 or 7 hours dealing with the bureaucracy. Police want to get back in those communities because community policing is really the core of policing. But such are the demands on their time at the moment, and the bureaucracy, and the fact that they are struggling now to retain experienced officers. People are hemorrhaging out of the police, and new recruits coming in haven't got that experience, and there's a good chance they may not stay anyway. So there's all sorts of problems. And for the Home Secretary to glibly say he wants more done, frankly, clearly shows he's got no understanding of the pressure police are under, and of course the constant criticism that they face across the board. Very rarely do you actually hear of police officers getting praised for acts of bravery or acts of compassion. So there's a problem with morale in the police force, and clearly a problem with the Home Secretary, who needs to get out there and talk to officers on the front line who frankly are struggling. And last night, of course, was a graphic example.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Saturday night and this is the Saturday 5. I'm Darren Grimes along with Albie Amoncona, Ben Leo, Benjamin Butterworth and Belinda DeLucy. Tonight on the show...
Liz Truss isn't a popular Conservative. It's time she left us all in peace.
Popping your cherry on the telly is a new low for desperate TV bosses.
Britain's universities have an Islamist problem.
I'm sick and tired of biological men cheating in women's sport.
And I'd rather a forgetful president than a lying one any day.
It's 7 p.m. and this is the Saturday 5. Welcome to the Saturday 5. Now, Valentine's Day, it's looming, but don't expect any candlelit dinners in our studio tonight as we tackle the week's hefty topics. However, I'm betting there'll be enough affection in the room to make at least 4 of us feel like prom royalty. And speaking of matters of the heart, we'll be chinwagging about Channel 4's latest creation, Virgin Island. And let's face it, for Britain's champion of woke, Benjamin Butterworth, that might be his only shot at escaping the land of eternal singleness. So keep your chocolates and roses at bay. We've got bigger fish to fry. Now, you all know the drill. We each get a minute to outline our case, then the topic's thrown open to the group, and it's fair to say that we don't agree to disagree. And of course, we want your views as well. Get in touch. Email gbviews@gbnews.com. But before we start tearing each other apart, it's time for your Saturday Night News with Sam Francis.
Darren, thank you very much. Good evening from the GB Newsroom. The headlines are just after 7 o'clock. Well, as we've been hearing today, GB News can reveal around 15 migrants have been rescued after crossing the English Channel in a stolen French fishing boat. The small vessel left the French coast between Calais and Dunkirk earlier this morning, and the boat was then handed over to UK Border Force officials. The migrants were then brought to Dover. That means that so far this year, almost 1,400 migrants have made the journey across the English Channel in small boats. Elsewhere, police are continuing their search of the River Thames here in central London for the body of chemical attack suspect Abdul Azidi. Earlier, a police boat was seen moving between Vauxhall and Chelsea bridges, with the Met Police saying that they began that search just after low tide around 9 o'clock this morning. The 35-year-old was last seen on CCTV leaning over the railings of Chelsea Bridge. And for those watching on TV, you can see Azidi there on the left-hand side of your screen, the figure just walking across the bridge. That was around 11:30 p.m. on the night of the attack, around 4 hours after he left the south of London. Detectives now believe Azidi died, and they say his body may never be found. A woman has today been charged with attempted murder after the suspected poisoning of 2 children aged 9 and 13. Emergency services responded to the scene in East Sussex on Thursday evening after receiving calls of welfare concerns. All 3 were taken to hospital for treatment in the local area. Appearing in court earlier, the 38-year-old woman was remanded in custody. We understand she will appear again in court on the 8th of March. Authorities have said they believe it was an isolated incident and that there's no further risk to the public. In Birmingham, pro-Palestinian protesters have been removed from a Barclays Bank branch on the High Street after staging a sit-in. 7 people you can see here lying down inside the bank with Palestinian flags and placards reading "Stop the Genocide in Gaza." It's being reported that one man, angered by those protests, was seen banging on the glass doors of that bank building. We understand, though, no arrests were made. Meanwhile, 3 people have been killed in a car that was hit by an airstrike in Gaza's southern city of Rafah. The Palestinians are claiming it was carried out by the Israeli military, and you can see here the aftermath of that attack, which happened earlier today. Medics also say that a separate strike by Israel overnight killed 17 other people in the same area. The strike comes after Israel's Prime Minister announced a plan to evacuate civilians from the crowded southern Gazan city, and he said to defeat the last Hamas fighters there. The US has also said that it won't support any further military action in Rafah without a guarantee of protection for civilians. Back here in the UK, large parts of the country could face further travel disruption and possible flooding as heavy rain hits later today. The Met Office has issued a yellow weather warning for rain covering Newcastle and surrounding areas all the way down to East Anglia and along England's east coast. That came in force just around 5 minutes ago and will last until 12 o'clock tomorrow. Another weather warning covering much of Cornwall as well as parts of Devon and Somerset has already been in place for the last hour. The latest round of doctors' strikes that are planned for later this month could, we understand, be called off. That's according to the BMA, if NHS bosses give more time for negotiations. The latest wave of walkouts were announced this week after the BMA said that the government had failed to put an improved pay offer on the table. They're also asking for a 35% pay rise, but that has so far been rejected by the government. Under the current plans, thousands of medics will strike in England for 5 days from the 24th to the 28th of February. And finally, Royal Navy aircraft carrier HMS Prince of Wales is setting sail this weekend. The £3 billion vessel will take over leading the largest NATO exercise since the Cold War. And it comes a week after its sister ship, HMS Queen Elizabeth, was forced to cancel its deployment because of an issue with its propeller shaft. That's just 18 months after HMS Prince of Wales itself suffered a similar malfunction. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen if you're watching on television, and if you're listening on radio, go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thanks, Sam. It's Saturday night and you're with the Saturday 5. I'm Darren Grimes and I can promise that you're in for a very lively hour. Let's crack on with tonight's first debate.
That's right. It's time to take a peer inside Darren Grimes' mind. It's time for Grime Time.
We could be on for some time, Albie. Now, folks, at home, hold on to your hats, right? Because this Daily Mail scoop is a doozy. Iran are recruiting British Muslims to spy on UK Jews and dissidents. Now, you might not be shocked by that, because I'm not. I tell you, it's about as predictable as rain in Newcastle. The Jewish Chronicle already showed us last year that Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps have been turning a London student group into a loudspeaker for extremist anti-Semitic garbage. The commander, Saeed Ghassemi, has been blabbering about the Holocaust being make-believe, cozying up with Al-Qaeda and egging on British students to join his madcap crusade against Jews. One of his mates, Hussein Yekta, claims Jews invented homosexuality. A new one. Is there anything that the Jews can't do, according to these nutters? And these hate fests, courtesy of this Islamic Students Association of Britain, according to the Jewish Chronicle, are being gobbled up by thousands. But that's not all right. This was just yesterday. Let's have a look at the University of Leeds, flaunting a banner saying boycott Israel, hooray for Houthis. The same rebels targeting British maritime ships. Oh, and guess what? They've just executed 13 men for being gay. I mean, teenage rebellion's one thing, but I draw the line, I don't know about you, at supporting gay-killing extremists. Where are those queer for Palestine privileged prats at now? And then there's the University of Birmingham with their Zionists off our campus banner. It's like they're taking notes from Hitler's playbook. And our Conservative Security Minister, Tom Tugendhat, well, he's just tweaked that the Houthis are being glorified on British campuses. But Tom, this rot has been festering under the Tories' watch. What about clamping down on foreign students that are opposed to our values, or illegal immigrants coming here with sinister agendas? There's no sign of that. I say it's time for some real Conservative muscle to squash this Islamist blight on our once proud nation. Belinda DeLucy, your kids, are you worried about them going to these universities at one point?
Well, I feel quite blessed. My eldest chose not to go to university, and she's now working 9 to 5 at 19, and I'm really proud of her, because I think there is a problem with Islamist bullying on campuses. I've experienced it firsthand myself at Speaker's Corner. I used to go all the time on a Sunday. It was a great date place, by the way, Speaker's Corner in the 90s and noughties, to take a date there, until there started to be hordes of Islamist men who weren't like my Muslim friends, and in fact attacked moderate Muslims as much as they attacked me or Jewish people, and they gathered together in such numbers and became so threatening in their shouting and cornering me. I stopped going. And the problem is, there are people out there saying, oh, why doesn't the Muslim community stand up to these Islamist bullies? How can we expect them to, when our own government refuses to stand up to them? Look at Boris Johnson and the Tories when they rejected Asia Bibi, the Christian Pakistani. When she sought sanctuary in this country, her application was rejected because they couldn't guarantee her safety because of the radical Islamists in our country, because they won't stand up to them. So unfortunately, I think they've opened the gate now.
And Ben, you have kids. I mean, do you worry about, you know, it's not just university campuses, although those pictures I think are totally shocking, and what they're actually advocating and supporting in campuses up and down the country. But also, head teacher Catherine Birbal-Singh, you know, she said that actually, in much the same way that Belinda's just articulated, that actually students are being pressured by parents more radical than perhaps some more, shall we say, moderate Muslims who into praying and these other things. And that's what actually enabled Catherine to say, look, I am not going to go ahead with this. This must end in our school.
Look, I don't think it's an Islamist thing, which by definition is what, like an extreme version of Islam.
It's a political ideology rather than... You know,
right. I mean, I was scrolling through Twitter earlier, as I unfortunately happen to do most days, inanely. But I came across an old Stacey Dooley BBC documentary from about 2012, which was called... It was about Luton, her hometown, which was... I can't remember what it was called. Was it My Fanatical Hometown or something like that? And even just what you'd call moderate Muslims Even at that time, in 2012, and things have got a lot worse since then, even the so-called moderate Muslims were displaying quite questionable behaviour about, I mean, for example, telling Stacey that she looked like she was dressed naked on the street, chanting for UK police to go to hell, etc., etc. So I don't think it's even just an extremist Islamist problem. I think there's a real cultural problem where these people in towns like Luton, Bradford, Leicester, lots of places up north, they don't just struggle to integrate, they don't want to integrate. And for me, it's a wider societal problem.
So, I mean, in a word then, are you optimistic about the future?
Well, no, because we've got uncontrolled mass migration of 700k a year legally, which the government could control and hasn't, around 50, 60k a year by the small boats. So, no, and they're predicting 10 million people over the next, how many years was it the other day?
It's by 2030.
Right, so no, I'm not optimistic
it'll be 70 million. But Albie, I mean, do you have a more optimistic take? Because we're being quite pessimistic now.
Do I have an optimistic take on the future? Yeah, I think I do have an optimistic take on the future more broadly. But look, we've got to look at why are these people protesting. They're protesting because of what is going on in Israel and Palestine at the moment. And I have to say, I am pro-Israel, but I think what has been going on, especially this week, with Netanyahu telling people in Rafah that they have to leave, which is where they were told to go because they were bombing northern Gaza. Now they're saying leave southern Gaza because we want to bomb there. I think it's absolutely appalling. So actually, I think what we need is a resolution to this crisis which is going on in the Middle East, and it doesn't seem like one is.
But it's not just the Israel problem. You had some young lad last year forced to grovel with his mum in a village hall and give an apology because he was autistic, because he scuffed the Quran.
Yeah.
Then you've got multiple other examples in London. You've got the Bible Sing school where she didn't want them to pray.
But the protest we were just looking at was a pro-Palestine protest.
Well, it was also holding up placards saying, Zionists not welcome here.
That same issue going on.
But they are firing at British ships, though.
They are, and I think that is wrong. But we can't kid ourselves. It's all linked to the same crisis at the moment.
I mean, Benjamin, coming to you then, I mean, do you accept that actually perhaps when we consider universities, there is a problem with the British academic left, for example?
I mean, I think, you know, I did my undergraduate at the LSE, London School of Economics, like where Albie also studied, so maybe it's a woke thing. But, you know, there is a university with a very long history of this kind of protest, so I don't think it's entirely new. But I wanted to pick up on what you mentioned at the start of your monologue, which was Iran. Now, I've written and investigated a lot about the actions of Iran on this country, and I think they are behind a lot of these revolutionary protests and Islamist movements that are going on in this country. There were, at the time I did my report, which was almost a year ago now, there had been 15 attempted assassinations on British soil linked to Iran and the Revolutionary Guard. I spoke to one person who'd been locked up in Iran and then she'd been sent back to the UK. She'd made it back to the place she lives. And she found that they had tried to poison her in an NHS hospital and kill her, and that she reported that to police. I spoke to someone who was told that they couldn't walk their own grandkids in the park because of the level of threat of assassination. And what did the UK government do? Almost nothing. The Revolutionary Guard is not a prescribed organisation, and so long as we bow down to these extremists that are meddling in our country, you will keep having this problem.
All right, that's very good. It's just proof that he can actually say some sensible things. But up next, though, it's Albie. Albie, what are you going to talk about today, then?
Well, I'm going to be talking about the notoriously unpopular Liz Truss, who has launched her latest venture this week called Popular Conservatism, a.k.a. Popcon. How cringe. She's also launched a new book, 10 Years to Save the West. This politician is trying to save her ailing political career. Liz, if you're listening, let me tell you, no one wants to hear it. You know, I would admire your audacity if every time you opened your mouth, I didn't see free market economic ideas becoming more and more unpopular. The simple fact of the matter is, when Liz Truss says tax cuts, small state, supply-side reform, the public want the opposite. Jeremy Corbyn cheers every time Liz Truss makes an intervention. That is how unpopular she is. She's damaging the cause of conservatism. She's done so much damage to the free market cause. How she thinks she should be the leader of a group called the Popular Conservatism Movement is beyond me. And why is it that credible, popular, Conservative figures like Nigel Farage, Priti Patel, our very own Jacob Rees-Mogg and the IEA's Mark Littlewood, why do they humour her delusions of grandeur by hitching themselves to the sinking Liz Truss ship? We would all be better off if Liz took a leaf out of her former Chancellor's book, Kwasi Kwarteng, apologised, admitted fault and made plans to leave Parliament. Liz Truss is not a popular Conservative. She's an unpopular Libertarian, and it's time for her to leave us all in peace. Darren, Liz Truss is a mate of yours. What is she doing?
Look, well, I think, first of all, another mate of mine, Nigel, actually said whilst he was there that basically she's copied the Reform manifesto. So I don't think he was there to endorse Liz Truss.
What is she on? What's she doing?
Well, I think actually Liz has been a really important voice on issues like China, for example. You know, as Foreign Secretary, she was beating the drum saying that we need to be more hawkish on issues like that. So I think you're being unkind to suggest. Unkind.
She has destroyed the free market cause for a generation. These are the ideas that you believe in, Darren, and she's destroying them.
I mean, I'd say I'm more natcon than I am popcorn, but I don't actually happen to believe that she tanked the British economy.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the fact that every time she opens her mouth, free market economics gets more unpopular.
You don't like her because you're not a Conservative. You're a Lib Dem in disguise. That's the problem.
Liz Truss literally was a Lib Dem, so what are you talking about?
You bump into a real Conservative and you get all confused about it and then don't like her.
Liz Truss was literally a Lib Dem.
Yeah, she was. She's not anymore.
She was literally a Lib Dem, and she's still an unpopular Libertarian.
She's not unpopular. Hang on a minute. She's not unpopular. She was voted by members.
Ben Leo, you call yourself a real Conservative. She is destroying the small state, low tax, free market cause, and you're happy with that, are you?
How's she destroyed it?
Because it's unpopular. Every time she opens her mouth, it gets more and more unpopular.
According to who?
People don't want to listen to her
Just because you say it's unpopular, it doesn't mean it's unpopular. Unpopular according to who?
Well, let me give you some facts.
You think they're good?
Hang on, let me give you some facts. If you look at the poll rating of party leaders at the moment and of former prime ministers, the lowest ones go to about -30, -40. Liz Truss is at -54.
What poll? I don't care about
She
polls.
is the most unpopular prime minister that there has been, and we saw that not only when she was in power, but in all the polls since. And as someone who wants a Labour...
Liz Truss was the greatest prime minister we weren't allowed to have. I don't care what polls say. The day before the 2016 US election, the polls said that Hillary Clinton had a 99% chance of winning. The polls said Brexit would lose in 2016. So I don't care what polls say. Just because you far left and you almost far left, a Lib Dem in disguise, think Liz Truss is popular. It doesn't mean it's true.
Can I just add that, you know, she also is a hypocrite because she made her whole stall being about the free market, and then when the market said, actually, no thanks, love, I'm not sure that works, she then condemned it.
She had no choice.
You can't have it both ways.
She had no choice.
And as far as I'm concerned, as someone who wants a Labour government, I say keep rolling Liz Truss out. She is a gem for the left.
Belinda, I want to get your view on this because you are senior in the Reform Party. Darren says Nigel thinks Liz has stolen all the Reform Party's ideas. Is this the kind of person you want talking about free market economics?
Number one, I think you're delusional when you say she's super unpopular. I was at the Manchester Tory conference in Manchester last year. The longest queue to go and see any Tory MP was the one for Liz Truss. She was also voted in by Tory grassroots members. I think she was popular because she challenged the establishment. She was a force for change for this sluggish groupthink economy policy.
54 net positivity.
Let me finish.
Rating.
The Tory party is now merely an extension of the civil service. They have no purpose. They do nothing. They stand for nothing except civil service, kneeling at international law blobbiness. Liz Truss wanted to challenge that, and that's why they hated her. Now, I'm no massive fan of her because she wanted to liberalise immigration, and also these Tories that show a bit of leg, a bit of right-wing leg to people like me while chained to the sinking ship of the Conservative Party. It is no longer the vehicle for Conservative policies, so I don't care what the likes of these right-wing Tories have to say. They're chaining themselves to a sinking ship, and if you want change, it's better to look to Reform UK
than Labour.
I love you. I love you, Belinda.
To a break, Albie, but in a word, I mean, or rather in a policy, what policy that she proposed at this PopCon event do you, as a Conservative, disagree with?
I think the policies are fine. You played...
Really?
The policies are fine. The person delivering these speeches is wrong. She should be ghostwriting for other people. She shouldn't be the front of any policy campaign.
Okie doke. Well, she does have a book out, apparently, Albie. Still to come tonight, Queen Gammon, Belinda de Lucy. She's very popular. She's going to discuss the cherry-popping Channel 4 show Virgin Island. Not my words, I promise. And Britain's wokest man, Benjamin Butterworth, argues for a Biden victory in November's US election. But next, it's our very own Ben Leo. He'll be discussing the parkrun decision to remove all gender, course and age records from its website. I wonder why. You're with the Saturday 5 live on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Lots of people very concerned about what's happening in the Middle East. Iran obviously denying it, but the next move from the United States, our key allies, will be absolutely key.
Absolutely right. And I think there's a lot of talk about where this could go, whether the situation could be escalated. But I think the chatter is heading in the right direction, which is about de-escalation. So if there are going to be targeted sanctions against Iran, that's already happened through expelling certain diplomats and other measures there. But you can do that without arm-to-arm combat at this stage. But I think the US will be weighing up all of its options. Antony Blinken obviously gave a press conference in the United States yesterday to say that, there will be a response from the US, but it'll be at their time and it'll be in the way in which they think is the most appropriate. So all eyes are now on the United States as to when it makes that move.
Yeah, and it's fascinating, isn't it, how domestic politics plays so much into international politics. The States, they've got a presidential election this year. We've got a budget coming up. So all the noise, both sides. You've got Donald Trump saying, go a bit more hawkish, I suppose you could say, than President Biden. And here we've got all the generals. We've got the Secretary of State for Defence coming out saying, we need conscription, we need more cash. But a lot of that is part of the sort of national narratives rather than actually looking at what's happening in Iran, isn't it?
It is. I mean, it plays into, the very uncertain times that we're living. And you're absolutely right. There'll be supporters of Donald Trump who are clearly adversaries of Joe Biden to say we must act now. It's a demonstration of showing your strength. Opponents of Biden will say that the US looks weak if it doesn't take action now against Iran, who are clearly, as we know, funding these at arm's length organisations like Hezbollah in Tehran, like the Houthis who are carrying out the attacks in the Red Sea. So Iran is responsible.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On Mark Dolan tonight, the community jogging group Park Run have been caught up in a trans row, with women runners no longer having their times published on the organisation's website. It's time to end the war on real women. In My Take at 10, Prince Harry spends just half an hour with his cancer-stricken dad and no meeting with his brother. He might be rich after the books and TV shows, but the young prince has paid the ultimate price. We're live from 9.
Welcome back to the Saturday 5. Cheers for your company and cheers for your emails. George has written in and George says, Albie, why not question why this mob only protests when Muslims are hit by Jews, not by fellow Muslims, which is a regular thing on a greater scale? Stop being an appeaser and man up. And Chris, good evening, Chris. Today, Benjamin is speaking sense about Iran. It's a miracle. Am I dreaming? I mean, it's true. You know, we all remember where we were, perhaps, some of our viewers at home, when JFK was shot. And I remember when I found out that Benjamin Butterworth was sound as a pound. It's extraordinary. Paul on Liz Truss, why don't the commentator who dislike her realise Rishi and Plums fixed the markets in order to denounce Liz?
Take your tin hat off.
John has written in, every time I hear the name Popcorn, I just think of popcorn. I think she should have come up with a better name. Well, that's one comment. Next up, though, it's Ben Leo, and he, as ever, has something to say.
Right. Is it just me, or are you sick to the stomach of shameless men trying their hardest to ruin women's sport? I've never understood how a biological man with all their inherent power and speed advantages, they take pride in beating women from anything from, well, swimming, rugby and football to tennis and, crucially this week, running. For me, it's the equivalent of going down to my local secondary school and beating all the kids in a 100-metre sprint. Where is the pride in that? Now, I want you to think for a second about the kind of person who celebrates that kind of thing, the lack of self-awareness, the narcissism, the selfish, spoiled, divine right to cheat other humans just so they can call themselves a winner. Well, the irony is, these people aren't winners, they're losers of the highest order. And that brings me to the latest episode of Biological Men Cheating Women's Sport, with news this week that community running organisation Parkrun is completely scrapping its men's, women's and age categories, seemingly in response to outrage that transgender women were revealed to hold some of the fastest records in parkrun history. So if you don't know what parkrun is, every Saturday across the country, up and down the nation, people meet at certain venues. In my case, it's on the seafront, and they run 5K, and it's normally timed. Trans athlete Lauren Jeska, who was born a man, has held Aberystwyth's female record since 2012 with a 5K time of 17 minutes 38 seconds, and that absolutely smashes, obliterates all the normal biological women he's racing against. And that's just one example, by the way. They completely deny Parkrun, that it's linked. But, of course, telling trans women they can't compete against smaller, less powerful women anymore is an absolute joke. They've not done it, and what they've done instead is decide to totally erase any element of competitiveness by scrapping statistics and records altogether. So there's no gender categories, no times, no age categories. It's just a turn up, run, and no one knows how you've done. More importantly, though, the parkrun team, they've shown their gutless cowardice by deciding it's better to ruin the event for thousands of people who enjoy their races week in, week out, in favour of what I call a cheating minority of biological men who take joy out of beating women. And let me be clear, before you jump on this, I speak for the majority of the nation here. I have no problem with trans people. Live your life how you want. I don't care. But when you start trying to cheat others out of the enjoyment and competitive spirit of sport, and in some cases put their lives in danger, I'm going to call it out.
Of course, Parkrun, Ben, would say, well, we're not putting lives in danger because they're running past each other.
Yeah, well, let's put Parkrun's, just for, in favour of balance, let's put Parkrun's defence across here. They say that they've erased all these categories, the timings and whatever else, because there's nothing to do with the trans debate that's raged. It's because, I mean, this is their statement. There was a disconnect between the performance data displayed so prominently on our website and our mission to create opportunities for as many people as possible to take part in parkrun events, especially those who are anxious about activities such as parkrun, but who potentially have an enormous amount to gain. I mean, I don't even know what they're saying there. What does that mean? That's from the head of communications. I think you need a new head of comms parkrun. But Darren, what do you think about this? Is this a cop-out from Parkrun? Are they cowardly and gutless, as I've explained them on my
I think it's a total myth to say that it's not a competition. The amount of sort of Gales coffee-holding women that I've seen running on these things around Clapham Common and running around, and that damn well is a competition. But do you know what I think? If you have gone from couch to 5K, right, if you have made that achievement, you've got off the sofa and you've started running as a hobby, and you build up and you start competing with other people.
Yeah.
I don't think you should have that taken away from you because, you know, Belinda Butterworth wants to compete in a couch.
But that's exactly what they've done. Instead of dealing with the trans issue, where a minority of trans women, biological men who are more powerful innately, they've got more muscle mass, more ATP in their muscles, more creatine, bigger lung capacity, instead of dealing with some cheating biological men, they just said, right, forget it, fun's over for everyone, we're not having any of this.
Why do you think their head of comms is lying?
I don't think they're lying. I'm just saying their statement was just inane. I don't know what they're talking about.
But if what they're saying is they don't want it to be as competitive and they want it to be open for people that maybe don't want to competitively run. They're just.
Are you saying you believe their excuse?
I'm asking. Well, I ask you why you think they're lying, which is a different question.
Well, what a coincidence.
Why do you think they're lying?
Well, what a coincidence. You've got people like Sharon Davies, ex-Olympians, people from across the board coming out and saying this is an outrage that you're allowing biological men to beat women, and then all of a sudden, the next couple of weeks, Parkrun are like, oh, OK, well, we'll just scrap all the categories altogether.
I think I think trans women competing against biological women is wrong, but I'm not sure that's what's going on here. I just don't know why your instinct is not to trust what they're saying.
No, because the three, apparently on the leaderboard, 3 of the top in the women's category were actually trans.
But Belinda, what kind of person, as I said in my monologue, it's the equivalent of me going to my kids' school, smashing them in a 100-metre sprint and then celebrating and being joyous about it. For me, it's totally embarrassing. I don't know what kind of person could do
Look,
that.
I think everyone knows what a woman is, right? We all grew inside one. We were all birthed by one. And if you deny the reality of what a woman is, you're either just being polite or you're lying out of fear. So I think the problem we've got now is a climate of fear that people are so terrified of standing up for women because it's always women that takes the attack on this. There's never any pressure on men to be #kind to men who want to identify women coming into their safe spaces, or to be kind to men in prisons, or to be kind to men who dress as women, allowing them. It's always women. Women take a back seat. It's one of the most misogynistic men's rights movements.
How do your daughters feel about sport?
My girls are super sporty. How to disincentivize a whole sex when we've spent decades trying to get women and girls into sports by saying to them, you know what, all the first, second and third places are going to go to biological males, and you better suck it up or we're going to call you a bigot and we're going to call you such vile names and threaten you with punishment, because this is how they act. This is how trans extremism treats women. It is horrific, and I'm so glad you stood up for us today, Ben, because if more men stood out and if people told the truth about what a woman is instead of this constant lying, then we'd all be better for it.
So, Benjamin, why do you hate women?
Yeah, I'll be honest, you're more likely to find me on the wine run than the park run, so this isn't something I've taken part in. But what we're talking about here is not Olympic-level sport. It's not a level of competitivity that has any consequence on people's careers or financial situations.
So you know, there's no skin in the game for you,
sorry, can you let a man speak for once? The fact is that I actually think this is an example of transphobia and bigotry. Because what you're saying is that these people who happen to have been born in a different description of a person to the one that you're used to, that they shouldn't even be able to have the pleasure and the leisure of doing this park run exercise on the weekend because of who they are.
No, they can.
The fact is, they didn't simply take out. They didn't simply take out
the male race.
They didn't simply take out the sex categories. They said that this is not about the competition.
Yeah, it was a cop-out.
And people like you and Belinda try to pin everything on hating transgender people. You are possessed and obsessed, and I'm sorry, it is bigotry.
No,
you are a woman hater.
Yeah, it's misogyny, pure and simple.
We'll agree to disagree on that one. Still to come tonight, Queen Gammon, Belinda de Lucy discusses the cherry-popping Channel 4 show Virgin Island. What a disgrace. But next, it's Britain's wokest man, Benjamin Butterworth, who'll argue for a Sleepy Joe victory in November's US election. You're with the Saturday 5, live on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Chris, what is the preferred way in which the police go about their business at the moment? There's these two strands of thinking: evidence-based policing versus bobbies on the beat.
It's very, very difficult. The problem that police have got, basically, is that they're too thinly spread, and it's too much is expected of them. There's a long list, isn't it? Every month we hear police need to do more about this, police need to do more about that, and police do their best. They're overwhelmed with bureaucracy. I mean, when I was a young PC, if I took a shoplifter in, then I'd be in and out within an hour. You take a shoplifter in now, and you're doomed for the rest of your shift. for 6 or 7 hours dealing with the bureaucracy. Police want to get back in those communities because community policing is really the core of policing. But such are the demands on their time at the moment and the bureaucracy and the fact that they are struggling now to retain experienced officers. People are hemorrhaging out of the police and new recruits coming in haven't got that experience, and there's a good chance they may not stay anyway. So there's all sorts of problems. And for the Home Secretary to glibly say he wants more done, frankly, clearly shows he's got no understanding of the pressure police are under. And of course the constant criticism that they face across the board. Very rarely do you actually hear of police officers getting praised for acts of bravery or acts of compassion. So there's a problem with morale in the police force, and it's clearly a problem with the Home Secretary, who needs to get out there and talk to officers on the front line who frankly are struggling. And last night, of course, was a graphic example.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday 5. Cheers for your company and cheers for your emails. Carol's written in about Liz Truss. Good evening, Carol. And she says she's more popular than he thinks. Her demise was due to backstabbing to put the favoured one, Sunak, in her place. Many economists support her economic strategy. That's you told Albie.
The viewers aren't stupid, Albie.
Barbara's written in. Barbara says about Park Run, thank you, Ben, you've redeemed yourself. You're not a bad spud.
Redeemed myself?
Well spotted. As to what they've done, it's a bit like when there's a blanket punishment instead of dealing with the guilty party. And now, Stefan, you're gonna mean that I have to get off air and go have a stiff drink, because Stefan has written in, and Stefan says, "Hi, please help." And you do need help, Stefan, because he says, I've tried searching everywhere. Can you ask Benjamin where his jacket's from? I really like it.
It's from the high street retailer Zara.
It says communist on it.
Other retailers are indeed available. Next, it's time for our next debate. And up next, it's Benjamin. He's going to tell us about why he would rather a forgetful old man than a lying old man. His words, not mine, as US president.
Sorry. Now, that will remind you of Joe Biden in recent weeks. But look, there's no doubting that Joe Biden has had some memory lapses of late. In fact, a special counsel investigation this week said that he was a well-meaning old man with poor memory, and that's one of the reasons why they wouldn't prosecute him on a claim. Now, it's not the greatest endorsement, but do you know what? We have a commander-in-chief, not just because they can remember everything that's going on in all 193 UN-recognised countries, but because of their judgment. And when the classified documents that were in question in this case were found to be in Biden's garage, what did he do? He sat down for a 5-hour interview, he owned up to mistakes, and he made sure that the important top-secret documents were all returned. Now, I'd rather a president with that kind of judgment than one who compulsively lies, because Donald Trump has more than 60 boxes of top-secret documents, according to the reports by investigators. And what did he do? He wasn't capable of being the dutiful public servant and owning up and apologising. No. What the tangerine liar did was he went and obfuscated and attacked the authorities who dared to question his judgment. Now, look, Biden might forget some scenarios. I think that much is evident now. But at least he doesn't forget decency and honesty. So when it comes to the election in November, then I tell you what, I back the old man with integrity and honesty and public service over the lying, racist, cheating old man that is Donald Trump.
Racist.
Now,
right,
Ben Leo, you're a desperate Trump fanboy.
Come on then, let's start with racism, shall we? Joe Biden, 2007. Joe Biden said, Obama is the first mainstream African-American who is articulate, bright and clean. 2006, Joe Biden. You can't go to a 7-Eleven or Dunkin' Donuts unless you have a slight Indian accent. 1997, forced busing to desegregate schools would see his children, Joe Biden's children, growing up in a racial jungle. You want to talk about racist? Joe Biden has got some of the most emphatic, long drawn-out racist history going in America. And the fact that you want some senile, deranged old man who doesn't even know what day of the week it is, if it was an animal, he'd be put down by now. But his wife, continually, Jill Biden, pushes him out there. The Democrats push him out there. He doesn't even know what's going on. And you want him to be leader of the free world?
Absolutely.
Did you see, Benjamin, Vladimir Putin's interview with Tucker Carlson this week?
I didn't watch all 2 hours and 7 minutes of it.
Can you imagine?
Unlike you, I have work to do.
Can you imagine Joe Biden sitting there for can any of you imagine Joe Biden sitting there for 2 hours reeling off history of America in such depth as Putin did?
Hang on, it's exactly what Joe Biden did, because he sat 4 or 5 hours in this. And the truth is that I think a lot of this is ageism of trying to attack Joe Biden. I would rather the man who has the integrity of the office, who is running an economy that is doing considerably better than the British economy, that has lower inflation, higher growth, more jobs created.
You're as senile as Joe Biden.
That is what Joe Biden is doing.
No.
And I think you are just trying to attack him so that you can get the dangerous racist into power
This week, he was what you actually omitted from your rant, whatever you could call that at the start there, was actually the fact that he was found to have not been fit to stand trial. So why...
That wasn't quite what it found.
Why, in your view, is he fit to be president of the free world?
Well, first of all...
the world under Donald J. Trump was a hell of a lot safer. You've just went on a very powerful rant about Iran. Iran, through their proxies in the Middle East, would not feel as emboldened as they do under a weak, left-wing president such as Joe Biden, who is frankly asleep at the wheel.
No, he's not at all. The truth is that, that Donald Trump makes just as many of these gaffes, but because he's aggressive and because he's rude and because he makes politics and entertainment sport, he gets away with it. Just for context, this is a guy who said, who said, oh, Joe Biden will lead us into the Second World War. Well, I'm pretty sure that one already happened, mate. We saw this week. We saw this week that Biden confused the Mexican president, the Mexican head of government and the Egyptian, but that is something that Donald Trump also did several times in recent weeks. The fact is that you have a choice between two 80-year-olds who don't have great memories.
Look, they're both terrible. America needs to stop picking such rubbish leaders. I don't want Donald Trump. I don't want Joe Biden. They're both terrible. These stale old men need to let a new generation of politician come forward. I think it should be Nikki Haley versus Kamala Harris.
Oh, my God.
You talk about ageism.
Nikki
There's
Haley.
only 3 years between Trump and Biden, and yet there's such a huge difference between how they conduct themselves. And what the world needs to see right now is a very solid, stable leader who is in control. Because Biden looks like he's completely not in control of anything, that someone else is pulling his strings. They can't wheel him out for longer than a few minutes before he starts losing what he says and pauses and looks like he's falling asleep. That doesn't do us any good at all. And I'll tell you something, on the race, he keeps saying Trump's a racist. Biden said something else, which is, I think, possibly the most...
In 2007.
Said possibly the most racist thing. He said, poor kids are just as talented as white kids. That's what he said. Now, but you say when Trump says things like that, he's a racist. When Biden says this stream of racist stuff,
because
that's just an old man double standards.
I think the way that President Trump has talked about Muslims and has talked about Hispanics boils down to racism. Look, you call him stable. Just because he's full of horse crap doesn't mean he's stable, Belinda. And the fact is that 2 former UK ambassadors to America have said that he is a danger to Britain's interests in the West. I think we should heed their warnings.
If Trump was in power, and you know
it. OK, right, we're going to hear more from Belinda de Lucy. She's going to be discussing the cherry-popping Channel 4 show, Virgin Island, with the Saturday 5 live on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there, with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Lee Anderson's Real World, Fridays from 7 p.m.
Dr. Jane Jones, who's the clinical lead for Care After Combat.
Yeah.
Jane, thanks for coming. And just tell me a little bit about your organisation. What do you do?
OK, well, thank you for having me here so we can talk about Care After Combat. So we are an organisation, a charity, who work into the prison system, working with military veterans who've somehow got involved with the justice system and...
So there's quite a high population of ex-servicemen and women in our prisons. Why is that, do you think?
So 2014, the government did a review of who was resident in UK prisons, and what they found were that military veterans are the highest occupational group, and this obviously raises some concerns. Yeah. So the government wanted to do something about that, and so they supported Care After Combat initially just as a scoping exercise, really, to see if there was any way we could help these men and women actually, understand the problems that led to offending behaviour and go on to lead successful lives.
So what sort of offending behaviour are we talking typically for people that's in prison that's actually served in our armed forces?
Primarily, it's violence.
Yeah.
So that is the highest offence that we work with.
Okay.
But of course, the military, as with everybody else, it's the full range of offending behaviour.
OK, so we're in a pub, Jane, Dr. Jane, and I guess for some people, the odd tip of alcohol is good, a bit of fun of a weekend, relax, let your hair down. But for some people, alcohol is not always their best friend, and I guess that plays a part in some of your veterans that end up inside.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, speaking from my own experience, a good 2/3 of the people I work with have some kind of mental health problem or mental health difficulty, struggling to either adapt into civilian life or with some of the traumas they've experienced during service. People might self-medicate with alcohol to manage some of those thoughts and feelings.
Yeah. Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday Five. As always, thank you for your emails. Angie's written in, and Angie says, well said, Ben and Belinda. Men should never compete against women. But the answer to sport is simple. Have 3 categories, men, women and trans. Richard says, does Biden's integrity extend to his dealings with China? Well, that's one for Benjamin Butterworth. But we haven't got time for that, unfortunately, because he is, I have no doubt, a big fan and would make plenty of excuses. But
Saved by the bell, Benjamin.
Up next, it's Belinda de Lucy, and Belinda is going to talk about something a little bit more interesting than Joe Biden.
Right, well, virgins are set to pop their cherries in front of the camera with the help of sex surrogates for new Channel 4 show Virgin Island. Cameras will follow virgins in their journey to lose it with randoms. How romantic. Is nothing sacred anymore? Whatever happened to finding a tender, private moment with someone you trust, or dare I say even love? And if today's online society has created a climate more hostile to intimacy and relationships, let's address that. Not send the message out that virginity is disposable for fame and ratings, especially on a show accessible to children. That's the very last thing Western culture needs right now, too. And who is going to verify contestants' virginity anyway? That's a really weird job. It's difficult to prove you're a virgin, and even if Channel 4 had a team of virgin testers on hand, that practice was outlawed years ago, thank God. And these social experiments on often mentally vulnerable people will only get more depraved unless we switch off from watching it. We need to push back from progressives' relentless attack on human boundaries and this nation's moral compass. Or, as the Manic Street Preachers once said, if we tolerate this, then our children will be next. So, this is a big morality question. I'm far more Mary Whitehouse and a bit against the sort of Sodom and Gomorrah route that media seems to be taking for clicks and trying to get more viewers.
I've got a question.
Yeah, you
Albie,
go ahead.
when are you on?
That's very funny. Well, I mean, I can assure you I'm not a virgin. But look, I think this television show sounds quite fun. I think I might give it a watch. And if you don't like it, just switch it off. What did you mean by your last line? It'll be our children next.
Because I think what Channel 4 has done in the past with things like Naked Education, for example, where they have had naked adults parading in front of children before the watershed time, it's going down the route of, I think, putting inappropriate, immoral stuff
100%.
on national television. It's different if it's YouTube
So what do you want to do? What do you want to do to tackle it? Ban it?
I think losing one's virginity is something that is very human, personal and private. We should be encouraging people to have romantic connections, not selling it or parading that kind of personal
And
information.
ultimately, this is a state broadcaster that's airing what I deem to be essentially OnlyFans on live television.
It is voyeurism porn.
And actually, if we look at the way in which in November of last year, Alex Mann, the top cheese at Channel 4, said, oh, we may have to actually go into our reserve funds that we have for emergencies, 75 million quid. They're apparently going in the kitty because they're so skint that advertisers have said we ain't going to go there anymore. So this is a desperate attempt to sell sex instead and try and boost their advertising revenue through that. I think it's an outrage.
I don't agree. I think this is a really important programme. I watched something similar recently.
Pervert.
Says you, Ben.
No, I watched something really interesting recently about middle-aged and slightly more than middle-aged people who'd never lost their virginity. And often they had serious emotional issues with intimacy, maybe from trauma or maybe that they built up themselves from lack of opportunity. And seeing these experts work with them to be comfortable close to another person, to be able to take the steps to get to that point. You know, our sexuality as human beings, for the vast majority of us, is absolutely inherent into lots of ways in which we perceive and feel the world. And I think helping people to deal with that, to be able to take that step, is very healthy.
I
and
agree
also
about therapy, and that's not a bad thing, but absolutely having it on TV and following people around with cameras with these, now they're called sex surrogates, they're clearly selling sexual favours for money.
But
I mean, there's another word.
You to watch it, Belinda.
Well, you said
no one's forcing you to pay.
What is it going to be next?
State-owned.
Public executions or violent?
It's illegal to execute people.
What this represents,
It's also
Albie,
illegal to sell sex.
What this represents is the moral decay, the further moral decay and decline of the West. Going around and flaunting something as special as virginity on telly for clicks and laughs at home is reprehensible. And it's like, you know, it's a slippery, sliding slope. And one key aspect of it, as Belinda's already said, is the children. It's a wink and a nudge and a coercement to sexualising children. It happens everywhere.
Complaining about other people doing things for clicks and likes is actually unbelievable.
It's not morally depraved.
I've never met someone who's more of a shock jock, clickbaity person.
No, you're just shocked that you've met a proper conservative.
But look, you're not even a conservative, you're a populist.
Are you worried, Benjamin, about the mental health of the contestants, that in 5 years' time this could be really
So would
damaging?
you have lost your virginity on live telly?
You're still waiting.
Yeah. I'm on series 2. But look, you know, I actually don't accept this argument that somehow pubescent young people seeing naked bodies, being aware of these issues, is a bad thing. It is a very good thing. I think as British people, we should be a lot less squeamish about these kind of activities, about the health side of it. And if you had that situation, I think you'd have far fewer examples of abuse, of people feeling unable to be comfortable in a relationship in the way that they want to be. Because we try and pretend that this isn't a part of life. I say we should take a leaf out of the French book and be more like that.
It's a pervert's charter, and progressivism, your progressives have hollowed out so many special, important family and child boundaries, and it needs to come to an end.
Right, well, that's it. That's it. No more from us. Thanks for our guests tonight and wonderful viewers as well. Next up, it's the brilliant Leo Kearse with the Saturday Night Showdown. Cheers for watching. We'll see you next week.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Have quite a foggy and murky night to come ahead of us leading into Sunday. Certainly could see some mist and fog patches forming relatively widely across areas of the UK. Quite a damp night as well, with showers pushing across the southwest. This band of longer rain moving into eastern England and eastern Scotland as well. Could be some localised disruption with this rainfall falling on already very saturated ground. Temperatures though underneath all that cloud generally holding up above freezing, but we can't rule out a patchy frost for some clearer spells across areas of Scotland. But it will be quite a damp start to Sunday again, with those showers pushing their way through. Could be quite heavy, maybe with some thunder along some coastal areas of the far south. Rain eventually clearing for eastern England, but it is going to be a very wet day for northeastern areas of Scotland. But some brighter spells developing as we head into the afternoon too, though, with some continuing showers moving in from the west. Temperatures generally around 7 to 11 degrees Celsius. On Monday, the area of low pressure that we have seen around this weekend will slowly drift its way northwards, a bit closer towards Iceland. That allows this northwesterly flow of air to start moving its way in. Quite a lot of isobars on the chart there, so it will be a relatively breezy day for most of us. Those showers will be most frequent in the north and west, particularly further parts of Northern Ireland, western Scotland, but areas further towards the east, starting off with a decent amount of sunshine, a bit of fair weather cloud bubbling up into the afternoon. Can't rule out the odd shower, but certainly drier here nonetheless. We hold on to a fairly changeable theme throughout next week, so further showers and longer spells of rain certainly on the cards for many. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
Mike Freer joins me now. Mike, thank you very much for coming into the studio.
Thank you for inviting me.
Firstly, how are you?
It's been a busy day, and it's been quite a traumatic experience. It's a real wrench to walk away from a job that you love, but also a constituency that you've become, I live there, it's my home, and I regard many of my constituents as friends, and it is an amazing place, and to walk away from that is really it's quite an emotional wrench to think this was a job I loved, but unfortunately I can't do it anymore.
Can you talk me through the process? Because you mentioned about the alleged arson attack, etc., being the final straw, but this has been a really quite vile journey to get to this point. So what kind of threats have you had? What's that look like?
Well, like every MP, I mean, you day in, day out, you get abusive emails, you get low-level stuff that, whether we should accept it, but we do, it's graffiti, it's things like, in the past I've had a mock Molotov cocktail left on the office door, meaning we had to evacuate the whole building. I've come out of my house and found a note on my car. Where I live is common knowledge, but what I drive is less so. And it's a few weeks after John Mann had the wheel nuts on his car tampered with. So that all kind of makes you get a bit, what on earth's going on. But I've had 2 run-ins with the organisation that was Muslims Against Crusades, and people like Anjem Chowdhury, who was behind that organisation, been to prison. But online it said, I used to do surgery in mosques, so I wanted to go out and see people. And online is a picture of me saying, you're not welcome in our mosque, let Stephen Timms be a pointed reminder. So it's not very subtle.
Well, just for our viewers and listeners who might not remember that,
Stephen Timms, of course, was stabbed by a woman who'd been radicalised. Thank heavens he survived. So it was a very unsubtle.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there. Coming up on the Saturday Night Showdown, with police looking for the Clapham acid attack suspect in the Thames, I ask, why on earth did the church help him to stay in the UK? And President Joe Biden escaped trial because prosecutors decided his cognitive decline is too severe for him to stand trial. But if he's not fit to stand trial, how's he going to be fit to run the biggest, most important country in the world for the next 4 years? And isn't it annoying when your other half leaves things in the fridge? Smelly cheese, kippers, testicles. Yes, we will be discussing the trans woman who left her testicles in her ex-boyfriend's fridge and sued him for throwing them away. It's literally nuts. This is your Saturday Night Showdown. Discussing all tonight's topics, my brilliant panel joining me tonight are Reem Ibrahim, Andrew Eborn and Lewis Schaefer. And of course, we want to know what you think about all of tonight's topics. We'll also be discussing the racist countryside and the steroid Olympics. Email in to gbviews@gbnews.com. Let us know your thoughts. But first, let's get your latest news and headlines from Sam Francis.
Good evening from the GB Newsroom. It's just gone 8 o'clock. Our top story today, well, as we've been reporting, GB News has learned that 15 migrants today were rescued after crossing the Channel in a stolen French fishing boat. The small vessel left the French coast between Calais and Dunkirk earlier this morning. The boat was handed over to UK Border Force officials and the migrants were then brought to Dover. And that means that so far this year, almost 1,400 migrants have made the journey across the English Channel in small boats. Police are continuing their search of the River Thames in central London for the body of chemical attack suspect Abdul Azidi. Earlier, a police boat was seen moving between Vauxhall and Chelsea bridges, with the Met Police saying they began that search just after low tide this morning around 9 a.m. The 35-year-old was last seen on CCTV leaning over